Songs of the Civil Rights Movement
by Nelson Febo, Nicole Ruyan, and Vivian Torres.
The Civil Rights Movement was a mass protest against racial segregation and discrimination in the Southern Hemisphere of the United States.
The movement began on December 1, 1955, when Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to move to the back of the bus in Montgomery, Alabama.
Martin Luther, a highly known minister, led and gave a voice to African Americans in the process for fighting for their rights, obtaining freedom from the discrimination, having equal opportunity in employment, and acquiring the same education and housing. He had a dream in proposing unity and achieved it in August 28, 1963.
One of the most important ways of expression is music. It is, and has always been, one of the best ways to unite people with similar aspirations and views. For example, during the 1960s, African Americans of the civil rights movements, who had voices of their own, used music to create anthems as a form of expression. Music allowed them to convey powerful messages against the injustice committed against them.
These next 5 songs have had a huge impact on the civil rights movement, varying from style, lyrics, and artists. The purpose of these songs was to unite African Americans in the battle for their rights.
Artists like Nina Simone, John Coltrane, Mavis Staples, and Bob Dylan have become important voices. Through their music, we can see the true feelings of African Americans. The 5 chosen songs were Alabama by John Coltrane, Mississippi Goddam by Nina Simone, We Shall Not Be Moved, adapted by Mavis Staples, Proud to Be Black by James Brown, and The Times Are Changing by Bob Dylan.
Known for being one of the most innovative and influential jazz musicians of the 20th century, John Coltrane is considered one of the many artistic voices of the 1960s. Born on September 23, 1926, and raised in North Carolina, Coltrane's love of jazz music became imminent after his draft into the U.S. Navy at the end of World War II. By 1960, Coltrane formed a group known as the Classic Quartet, with who he had developed an innovative style of play. Although he did not directly state that he was a political activist, it was during this time period in which he had gained status as a strong supporter of the civil rights movements. This was demonstrated with the creation of the song Alabama.
The song Alabama delivers a powerful message against injustice, violence, and oppression that many African Americans were facing back then. Coltrane had written this song as a response to the bombing of Birmingham Church on September 15, 1963, in which 4 girls lost their lives. Alabama is a song that builds up from the sadness and inspires a determined future against crimes against black. There is sorrow behind this song, as it's mourning the death and injustice that has occurred. Not only does this song capture that sad moment, it also reminds the listener of the beginning of the civil rights movement. But even though the song does carry a tone of sadness, it builds up from it and quickly inspires transformation and becomes the anthem of the civil rights movement. Coltrane uses this song and jazz music itself to express his concerns against the crime occurring and, as Martin Luther King, to inspire change.
Nina Simone is the artistic name of Eunice Kathleen Wayman. She was an American pianist and singer, known as one of the greatest voices of the 20th century. Also, she is a legendary performer characterized by her compromise against racism and her fight for equality. By the mid-1960s, she became known as the voice of the civil rights movement, wrote Mississippi Goddam in response to the 1963 assassination of Medgar Evers and the Birmingham church bombing that killed 4 young African American girls.
It's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest, and everybody knows about me.
racial inequality heralds a shift in the movement, as well as it turned more toward Black pride and empowerment. Criticism is seen towards the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, which was a terrorist attack in Birmingham, Alabama, on September 15, 1963, on the African Americans of the 16th Street by local members of the Ku Klux Klan. She mentions the roles that African Americans had as slaves and servants. Simone wishes for equality and the end of segregation. The oppressed believed that prayers could better the situation, but in this case, hope was lost. She expresses how they don't feel safe to walk on the streets. They believe that every day could be their last. Nina Simone shows anger against society because of the lack of equality and bad treatment given to African Americans. She is mad that they are treated as less. Also, sadness is noticed when the four girls are killed and towards dehumanization. Fear and frustration are expressed when they are punished for fighting for what they believe in. I believe that Nina Simone is using her music to alert others to try and make a change, stating that we are all equal men.
Mavis Staples was a civil rights activist in 1939. She began singing with her family in the group called Staples Singers. Their goal was to fix the problems in the world through their songs. They gave a concert in which they knew their role model, Martin Luther King, would attend, stating after meeting him that their ideal was that if he could preach it, they could sing it. Mavis Staples then started her solo career in 1969. There are various versions to We Shall Not Be Moved, but in my opinion, Mavis Staples interpreted the song perfectly. She gave a voice to protesters.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree.
As heard, We Shall Not Be Moved has a collective voice that reflects hope and racial unity. It was believed that their resistance was mainly because of their equal faith in God, and because African American protesters were convinced that they were part of the same nation. The author also used repetition to mark four main statements. The first and second being, we shall not be moved because we're part of the nation and because we're fighting for our rights. And the lyrics, just like the tree that's planted by the water, he or she defines their equal roots to the nation and metaphorically explains their stable place in society. The third is, we shall not be moved until we get our freedom. And last but not least, the fourth, we shall not be moved until our nation is united. Its passive voice brings a state of tranquility and union. The song directly asks, why are blacks margined aside? Just like the lyrics say, black and whites should be together because they have the same origin, live in the same place, and both are equal men. We Shall Not Be Moved is a recognized song which has been established as a hymn for the oppressed.
Known as the Godfather of Soul, James Brown was a singer, songwriter, and activist who is considered by many an iconic figure of funk and soul music. Born in South Carolina, May 3, 1933, Brown has easily influenced many artists with his unique musical style and voice. His music career began when he decided to join the R&B vocal group The Gospel Starlighter, and he quickly rose to stardom thanks to his passionate performances. In the mid-1960s, Brown had gotten involved with social movements of the black community, and it was during these years that he helped champion black pride and culture. Brown did this with the song Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, a song that quickly became an anthem of the movement as it continued to fight for justice and equality.
Some people say we got a lot of malice. Some say it's a lot of none of it. I say we want what we do. If we get what we deserve, we can build.
Although much can be said about the song Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, there is no doubt that it is a piece about being assertive, demanding, and self-confident in being an African American. In this track, James Brown uses his style of soul music with the hope that people, particularly black children, find the need to feel proud of who they are. Brown expresses this message clearly because it should not be hidden nor oppressed inside, but rather shouted out with confidence. The purpose is that blacks embraced who they were with the mantra, I'm black and I'm proud. Now, apart from the 8 powerful words repeated throughout the song, this piece is considered as powerful as a message written for a speech. This can be argued with the fact that Brown, like many speakers of the civil rights movement, sought out to define black culture without the pre-established terms used by society. The song was produced and came out in 1968, a time where the civil rights movement was going through major changes, and its creation allowed many African Americans and those listening around the world that there was a dire need to feel proud about being black, about fighting for their rights and not settling for anything less. However, it's through the lyrics that Brown talks to blacks and wishes them to become better and to feel empowered. For example, with the lyrics, some people say we've got a lot of malice, some say it's a lot of nerve, but I say we won't quit moving until we get what we deserve. Brown is talking about the riots and the people rioting during the 1968 and that blacks should keep fighting and demanding greater equality. Brown also calls upon Americans to see that they should be fighting with them. It is also with the lines, "We rather die on our feet than be living on our knees," that Brown requests that African Americans continue to fight for their rights until the times change for the greater good. It is with these lyrics, sound, tone, and message that classify this song as one of the many anthems of the civil rights movement and make James Brown a major voice of the 1960s.
Bob Dylan was one of the most influential singer-songwriters of the 20th century. He was known for songs that narrate social and political issues. His fame was granted by his allegiance and empathy to the civil rights movement. His vigorous and wise way of song composing gave rise to the difference between generations and contrasting of political views of the 1960s in the United States. Notice some important verses such as "Don't criticize what you can't understand."
The land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing.
As heard, it is a song about perception, transition, and acceptance. Dylan uses biblical allusions such as "amid the waters you have grown" to explain society's tolerance. He believes society transforms by learning from the mistakes throughout history. Dylan, in his progressive voice and country genre, encounters the acceptance to social change. In the verses, "Stand in the schoolhouse door" and "Don't criticize what you can understand," he talks about social justice campaigns that aren't understood by the government.
Bob Dylan explains that change is good, and a changing view about skin color means health and goodness for society. Change means progression. Oh, and by the way, fun fact, Bob Dylan had a relationship with Mavis Staples.
The civil rights movement made a mark in history. Around the 1950s and 1960s, African Americans were dehumanized and treated as inferiors because of their color of the skin. They were used as servants, as slaves. Nonetheless, they were victims of segregation. Many lost hope, experienced fear, sadness, and anger.
Music is a form of self-expression using harmony and melody. It was used to create anthems as a form of self-expression and allowed to convey powerful messages against injustices that were committed. Some of these artists were Bob Dylan, James Brown, James Coltrane, Nina Simone, and Mavis Staples. Each one used their music to convey the reality they were facing, to try and make a change, to alert and convey their feelings.
They were the voices for those of that, because of segregation, felt they didn't have one. With the help of music, time, and Civil Rights Act, people began to open their eyes. Consequently, equality came to light for many African Americans.